Okay, well, it is Monday, October 5th, 2015. This is the Real on the Field Goals Instant Reaction podcast, where myself, Kenneth Arthur, and Danny Kelly of FieldGoals.com get together right after every game to give our instant reaction for the Seahawks' most recent game. And this was one to certainly remember and one that we'll probably be talking about for a long time, but hopefully not tonight. We'll make it quick and let you guys get back to whatever it is you're doing, whether you're listening this on the way to work on Tuesday or late at night on Monday because you're still reeling from Seattle's 13-10 win over the Detroit Lions on an amazing final play and a controversial call, of course. And I just want to remind you that Real on the Field Goals is brought to you by the Ballard Agency. Go to ballardagency.com or call 425-454-3510 and tell them Field Goals sent you. And that's an insurance agent, broker with many of the top. They'll get you set up with all your insurance needs, and it'll help out Field Goals. So, Danny, let's start right with the news of the game. The thing that, there were so many things we could have talked about for the first 59 minutes of that game, and it turns out that we'll just end up talking about the last play probably for a long time. It was pretty nuts because up until that point, the Seahawks defense was playing at least as good as they did the previous week when they shut out Chicago. And if you look at their, if those first 19 drives that they've had on defense, as I saw from Jackson via Matt Nichols on Twitter, the first 19 drives, they had 18 punts forced and 1 field goal allowed. And here on the final drive, the John Ryan boots a long punt. They set the Lions back on the 9-yard line, and they go 90 yards. Officially, it says here 10 plays for 90 yards. Calvin Johnson catches the ball. He runs it in to the half-yard line when just then Cam Chancellor punches it out, forces a fumble. It goes out towards the back of the end zone. KJ Wright seeing the ball, and I remember looking at it and being confused for a half second about why not KJ Wright just tried to grab the ball, but of course, in that case, it would have been a touchback. And it seems like we're all good to go. The Seahawks have the ball, but the big controversy, was it an illegal batted ball? What are you hearing as far as this rule? Did the Lions get screwed?
Well, I mean, it looked pretty obviously that it was pretty obvious that he did mean to bat it out. So yeah, it was a missed call by the referees, but I guess it was a judgment call or whatever. And I think technically Calvin Johnson would have had to recover that to get possession back. So I mean, I don't know. It was a tough call for the Lions. Definitely, I think the referees missed it, but. Yeah, I mean, the Seahawks got lucky on that one, but it was a really, really great play by Cam Chancellor to punch it out. I mean, it was just a perfect ending to a really stupid game. The Seahawks, I mean, just tried to lose that game. I saw a Doug Baldwin interview after the game, and he was pissed, and I'm actually I don't blame him whatsoever. That game really sucked. It was fun defense. The defense played well. Held what's his name, Matt Stafford to 5.8 yards per attempt. I think they punted their first 9 times down the field. So yeah, I mean, it was a good game defensively. The Seahawks offense just looks terrible. Russell Wilson turned the ball over on 2 fumbles, and then he also threw what was the third one? Oh, that was the missed punt by Tyler Lockett. So overall, they tried to lose the game, but they managed to do it. And I don't know. Yeah, it was a frustrating game, but good to get a win. I mean, because a win's a win, frankly. So you needed that win tonight, and they managed to pull it out.
Yeah, last week we were talking a lot about the asterisk of playing Jimmy Clausen and a bunch of no-name receivers in Chicago. This week, Calvin Johnson, Golden Tate, Eric Ebron, Matthew Stafford, Amir Abdullah, at least in the passing game, and just breaking down, they had 10 drives. The first one was 5 for 18, then they go 2 for 21. Then they go 5 for 20, and then the Lions kicked a field goal on their next drive, so 57 yards, and that was the first points allowed by Seattle at home this season or with Cam Chancellor coming back. Then the next drive was 13 yards, then 7 yards, then 4 yards, then 6 yards, then 1 yard, and then 90 yards.
Yeah.
So it's just nuts. But at that point, it seemed like there was a momentum shift after, since that field goal that the Lions kicked, their yards on those drives totaled. That was one of those was -4. So 16, 22, 27. So 27 yards, and then the next Seahawks drive when they're basically just trying to line up for running the clock down, and they're up 10 points at home, and that's when the offensive line again lets a bunch of guys through. What were your thoughts as far as that game-turning fumble that Russell Wilson, when he lost the ball and it was returned for a touchdown? What percentage would you lay on the offensive line, and what percentage would you lay on Wilson?
I mean, I need to watch it again. I don't really my first thought was that it looked like they were trying to do a screenplay, but I'm pretty sure that they weren't, which means the offensive line was fucking atrocious. Because when you have three free rushers, even when right before the snap, Russell Wilson called out the blitz. He did a hard count, saw the blitz coming, and then for some reason the offensive line still let 3 guys through almost immediately. I mean, the offensive line was just so incredibly bad. It's obviously frustrating. It's the big thing right now that the Seahawks need to figure out and get cleaned up. But yeah, I mean, they just can't block guys one-on-one. They just can't do it. They're getting beat way too often. And obviously 1 or 2 of the sacks probably on Wilson today again. And then another sack, everyone was kind of killing the offensive line, even though the one sack where Russell Wilson fumbled the first one, that was an unblocked guy on the end and a read option play, and that guy was by design not blocked. So stop talking about the offensive line sucking on that play specifically. But that said, overall the game they were terrible. So I mean, I guess on that play, the Russell Wilson fumble, you could fault a poor snap for that. So I guess technically it is the offensive line being awful. But yeah, I mean that's really the main takeaway from this game is that the pass protection was pretty terrible most of the time, and yeah. But
Wilson comes. Yeah.
The only thing we're going to hear all week is about this batted play. So whatever.
Right. Wilson comes into the week averaging 6.9 yards per attempt. That would be a career low. 94.2 QB rating. That would be a career low. But he comes out of this game. He was 20 of 26 for 287 yards, 11 yards per attempt.
Russell Wilson?
Yeah, and a passer rating of 125. So his best game of the season, and so far at home, his passer rating is well over 100 in his 2 games at home. He's always played better at home. Meanwhile, Matthew Stafford, 24 of 35 for 203 yards, 5.8 yards per attempt. The one interesting thing as well is this is the first time in franchise history the Seahawks don't have an interception after 4 games, which is just the most odd and ironic thing that you could think of for the Seattle secondary to go 4 games without an interception to start the year. I mean, is that just a funky thing that happens, or are they not? Is our teams careful? It's not like they're playing against Matthew Stafford and Jay Cutler, obviously, and Nick Foles, and then the other one was Aaron Rodgers. But how could they come out of those 3 games, especially, and not have any interceptions when you've got Sherman and Thomas and Chancellor now for the last 2 games about? Is that something that you find to be just a weird anomaly?
The no picks thing, I think. I mean, they had 2 chances at it today. I think both of them kind of missed it. Cam Chancellor and Kerry Williams both went up at the same time and kind of ran into each other, and so that was one. I mean, I think it's a mix of guys are being in position, not making a catch, or just not throwing passes that are interceptable, really. So I don't know. I wouldn't read a whole lot into it, but yeah, I mean, at this point, they're 4 games in, no picks, which is a little weird, but they, as Richard Sherman says all the time, they come in bunches. So I wouldn't read too much into it at this point yet.
The big storyline going into the game was the absence of Marshawn Lynch and the start of Thomas Rawls. Here's a guy that couldn't get drafted 5 months ago, and he's starting for the Seattle Seahawks at home on Monday Night Football. Rawls finishes 17 of 48, 2.8 yards per carry. Obviously, I think that I don't know what his second half numbers are, but they must be a lot better than his first half numbers. As the game went on, did you feel pretty good about Rawls?
I mean, it's hard to tell because he really was getting hit like every time behind the line. The offensive line did not do well in any phase really tonight. It's amazing Russell Wilson had such great passing numbers because I mean, he was running for his life several times. But anyway, I it's tough to really know. I think he ran hard. I don't think he's like an elite back or anything like that. And maybe people were overly excited about it last week. I think he's a good hard runner. I think that third down play where they did the toss sweep, he probably should have had a first down, but he hesitated and then, kind of danced around and wasn't able to get there. And so that play came in as a negative in my mind. But overall, I think he did all right considering he's a UDFA, rookie who it's early in the season. So all those things combined, he did as well as you can expect. So I think it sounds like Marshawn Lynch will be back next week, so that should be good.
Yeah, it'll be a big for Seattle as they travel to Cincinnati to take on the 4-0 Bengals. Obviously, I think maybe not so dissimilar. I think it's hard to say that playing in Cincinnati is as hard as playing in Green Bay, but maybe the expectations are going to be a little bit more tempered this week as they normally would be. As far as tonight goes, there could be a couple candidates here that I think as far as the whole game is concerned, or just at least maybe one in particular play. But if you could think of one guy that would be your perhaps DK player of the day, a thing that I just came up with, who would be your DK player of the day?
I mean, I think obviously Cam Chancellor. He had several really huge hits. He was flying around. You could just tell he was really he was keyed in. The Seahawks defense really did play really well, and that's going to get lost in the clamor of the missed call at the end there this week. But the Seahawks defense did really well. Forcing the ball out on the 1 yard, 1 inch line, really. To force that fumble, that's a huge play. It's really a shame. That that whole controversy is going to kind of cloud that and everything because it was an amazing play. So yeah, I mean, you can just tell the Seahawks defense is different when he's in there. As Pete Carroll said several times, he makes them whole. So he was the player of the game to me. It's obvious that Russell Wilson played well as well. Those fumbles are really tough, but again, both of them are kind of you could assign blame really to the offensive line on the second one particularly, but even
they were up 13-10. There was time left, and if the Seahawks don't get that, they're 3rd and 2. They decide to pass it again, and Russell Wilson, he has to escape a sack again, and he completes a 50-yard pass to Jermaine Kearse. I mean, most of it on the run, but still, his elusiveness made him quite valuable tonight. And definitely, I don't see the Seahawks winning that game without a performance like the one they got out of Wilson, despite the fact that there were 2 fumbles. So there are plenty of good candidates for my KA player of the day, which I'll try to make different from yours. And I would say that I was very happy with the performance of Cliff Averill tonight, who had 4 tackles, 1 tackle for a loss, and 2 pass deflections. He was very active. The problem being for the whole team as a whole is they have 0 sacks tonight, and it just seems like they're not getting there very often. They're getting the most push. We've talked a lot about the Pro Football Focus talking about how Averill and Michael Bennett are the two that provide the most pressure on the ends of any 2 defensive ends in the NFL, and I think we still saw that tonight. Bennett also had a great game, but now they are 4 games in, and they just have 6 total sacks. None tonight. Another guy that I would highlight, Kerry Williams. He was out there. Obviously, John Gruden gave him a lot of praise as well, which can be sort of I don't know. But it seems like, oh, I don't want to get caught up in the fact that he was John Gruden's grinder or whatever. The fact that he 4 games in, I think we really are seeing that the system works, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think 4 games in, I think Jackson tweeted something the other day about how he was like the least targeted cornerback with at least 50 targets or something like that, or at least 50 coverage snaps, or I don't know what the thing was, but essentially the bottom line is he's not getting targeted very much. He's doing his job. He's not getting beat deep, which is huge. That was obviously kind of the big deal last year in Philly. A lot of people were killing him because he kept biting on double moves and things like that. But yeah, I mean, he's playing well and he's doing his job, and it looks like he's really learned the kick step or the step kick technique that we talked about during the off season. Because he struggled with it at first. Obviously, it's a little bit counterintuitive. But yeah, I mean, you have to be really happy with how he's playing, and it kind of makes you wonder, because especially seeing Byron Maxwell struggle so much in Philly, it kind of makes you wonder if it's a system thing too. Like Seahawks are not asking their guys to do things that they can't do, kind of thing. So that's big, and yeah, so it's huge. Right now it's looking like a good signing. They haven't skipped a beat in that sense out there on that end. So yeah, it's been encouraging so far.
As Danny Kelly retweeted himself right now, in the last 10 minutes at least, Marcus Burley a broken thumb. Ricardo Lockett was sick tonight, and Fran Jackson has a sprained ankle. Jackson had a really good game to start out, so that's going to be something that we would hope he comes back, because I think the trio of Marshawn Lynch, Jackson, and Rawls could be quite dangerous as the season goes on. I think that, yeah, and then just another thing about this batted ball thing. It's just so funny to hear how many people they see something and then like the fans, they see something and they latch onto it, or writers, they latch onto it and they're like, let's get the pitchforks and everything like that. And it's like, when the play happened and everybody saw KJ Wright knock the ball out, everybody saw it in the entire world. You saw KJ Wright intentionally knock the ball out of the back of the end zone, and nobody in the world knew that was supposed to be a penalty. There was no complaining about it except for one guy that was probably out there that said, oh, yeah, I know all the stupid rules down to the very last one. And then it gets out. After the game is over, 20 minutes later, oh, that was actually a penalty and the Lions should have kept the ball. And now everyone's like, it's not like a defensive pass interference. It's not like Des Bryant's catch. It's nothing like that at all. It's something where everyone is now admitting that there's a technicality that then all of a sudden this should matter. And, let's also not forget that, the Lions would have had the ball at the 1-yard line. A lot of teams cannot punch it in from the 1-yard line, ask the Seahawks. They would have had, they could have gone to the field goal, and then the Seahawks had all, 3 of their timeouts or whatever, 2 timeouts left at that point. They would have got the ball back with a minute and a half. They would have only needed a field goal to win. So there's a lot going on here where it's not like the Lions lost the game on a call. The Lions lost an opportunity on a call. So it's not something that should necessarily be talked about for too long, but of course it will. The fact that Golden Tate was standing on the goal line of a controversial Monday Night Football game with the Seahawks is just incredible. First quarter also, I want to talk about, you and a lot of other people were singing the praises of Bobby Wagner. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, he played a great game. He had a really, really good game. Someone that could be something I break down this week too. He was all over the place. Tackles for loss, break. He was used as a blitzer on several occasions. He was good in coverage. Really, big hits. Him and Cam really kind of set the tone, so that was really good to see. KJ Wright had a good game as well. So yeah, it was a really encouraging thing. I'm just trying to stay focused because I'm seeing so many people just bitching and moaning on Twitter right now. It's literally like pitchforks. Like, villagers are out. Like, I understand, I get it. Yeah, they lost on a controversial call that was incorrect. I understand that, but Jesus, it's what are you gonna do? It's over.
Yeah, that's what happens when we get the instant reaction. Obviously, that means that we're reacting to the reactions as well. But I don't think that Pete Carroll will tell the Seahawks that they have anything to feel ashamed about. I think that they won this game, and at the end of the day, the problems did stem from not being able to close it out, which is something that they had a problem against with the Rams. They could not come up with big plays at the end against Green Bay, but all that matters right now is that they're 2-2, one game back in the NFC West, and have just as good of a shot now. The Seahawks were 2-2. No.
What?
I was thinking of something else, but yeah, the Seahawks were 4-0 in 2013 when they won the Super Bowl, but they were 2-2 in 2012, and they went to the playoffs that year. They were 2-2 in 2005, and they went to the Super Bowl that year. So there's been plenty, and they were 2-2 in 2010, and then obviously they went 7-9 that year. Those are the last 3 times that they've started out a season 2-2. They've made the playoffs. So they're still in a pretty good position now. You've done a lot of writing and study of Andy Dalton. Do you have any early thoughts as far as the Seahawks Week 5 game?
Yeah, I mean, the Seahawks are really walking into probably one of the hottest teams in the NFL right now in Cincinnati. It's a road game. That's obviously going to be tough. Is it an early game? I think it might be a 10 a.m. game too, which makes it even tougher. This is just a really, really tough game. That's what made winning this game so important for the Seahawks. So obviously they got really lucky to escape with this game. So it's going to be a test. The Seahawks tend to they're hard to figure out. Like they tend to play up to their opponents at times and down to their opponents at times. So I think they're going to give the Bengals a good shot at this, and I think they could make it a really tough game for a close game towards the end. But they're walking into probably one of the hottest teams in the NFL. It's going to be really tough, and expect a battle next week.
We talked about it, I think, around Week 1 when we were talking about the St. Louis Rams defensive line. We saw it tonight with Ezekiel Ansah, the Lions defensive line, with Russell Wilson getting sacked 6 times, 2 fumbles, one of them recovered for a touchdown, constantly running around, had to do the magic to make it happen. And this week against the Bengals, they're going to be facing off against Carlos Dunlap. He has 3.5 sacks. Geno Atkins, obviously an all-pro type defensive tackle. He has 3 sacks. Michael Johnson, Wallace Gilberry, D'Amato Pico. This is one of the defensive lines that I think you feared the most going into when we were talking about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, God. Hopefully they. In the Seahawks, like against the Packers, I think they want to say they had pretty good pass protection, and so they've been inconsistent. And so I'm hoping that offensive line shows up, but this could get ugly, or they could improve. It's just kind of one of those things. And so the Seahawks have talked about how they need to, all the stuff they have is fixable and all that. And I think that's true on some level. A lot of it is communication and things like that. But at the end of the day, they might just be really not good players. So we'll have to see. But yeah, that could be like the big matchup to watch. That defensive line is really good against the Seahawks struggling offensive line. But the Bengals, they have a good secondary as well. They're just good all around.
Sure.
Their defense is going to really have to step up the Seahawks against, the Bengals have some really good receivers. They got some tight ends that are really good. They're really going to have to play a really good game to win that next week.
Yeah, it's going to be one of the toughest games, especially at this point. It would be, I think at this point you've got 2 teams. You got the 4-0 Bengals. They've never really proven, over these decades that they can actually stand with the big boys. And here they are, off to one of their best starts in franchise history and actually looking and playing the part and trying to get over the hump. And you've got the Seahawks who have been to the last 2 Super Bowls, and they're down a little bit, even though coming off of 2 wins. Certainly people will say that this wasn't a good win, despite the fact that the defense looked great. They've only allowed 3 points. The defense has in the last 2 games. All 18 of the 20 drives they've faced have ended in punts. One of them has ended in a game-winning forced fumble. But at the same time, I think at the end of the day, whoever comes out of this win, if the Seahawks come out with a win, and they get a road win over a 4-0 team like Cincinnati, then people will be talking about them at the top of the NFL scrap heap again, and that they are right back to where they were. And if the Bengals come out with a win, then all of a sudden they're right there at the top, 5-0, having beat the Seahawks, and looking like perhaps they could be the next something in the NFC, AFC. So it'll be the one where they try and say that they deserve to be with New England and Denver. Although I still think for the Bengals, what they really need to do is prove that they can consistently beat the Ravens and the Steelers. So, but that would still be a great win for them. After the game, I gotta say this. After the game, Michael Bennett said, "I don't like Matthew Stafford much. He's from Dallas. They killed the president." In parentheses, JFK. I hold it against him. Now, Michael Bennett has said a lot of crazy shit over the years, but this is probably the craziest thing he has ever said, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes. He sounds like an insane person, and it's not surprising. Although, that's just classic. He's hilarious. Like, random thing. He's from Dallas.
Yeah. And they play Dallas this year. I don't know why the Cowboys fans are going. He actually has to travel to Dallas for a game in a month. So he's really fighting fire with fire right now.
It's really weird.
Yeah. But I hold it against him specifically.
It's all his fault.
Bennett also obviously came out in favor of Cam Chancellor after the game while he was trying to do his post-game interview and saying, pay him, pay him. I think at this point, after a game like this for Chancellor, it's not something that's necessarily people are going to be talking about, that he is proving and then has proven that he is severely underpaid. Do you think that your stance at all has changed after seeing the Seahawks differences from the first two games to the second two games? Has your opinion of his value changed at all?
I think it has a little bit. Yeah, I think I'm realizing he's more valuable to their overall team than I realized before. I think, but at the same time, they can't allow a good player to hold you hostage. Just as a principle, I think they couldn't really relent, and that's why they ended up, going 2 games, even though they were struggling. And they were looking at a third game there against who was it last week? I can't even remember already. Yeah, Chicago. But yeah, they held strong for a reason. You can't have a player, regardless of how good he is, holding you hostage like that in terms of 1 year after your new contract is kicked in. So, but at the same time, I think I do realize now that he's more important to the defense than I thought. Sometimes with strong safety, you don't really know. Like he's kind of like a box, extra linebacker. You don't know how important he is, but. I think it's kind of showing clearly that he is kind of the glue that holds that defense together. So it's great to have him back. And I imagine that they'll run into contract stuff again next offseason, but until then, I'm not going to think about it.
Yeah, and it'll definitely be interesting to see how that plays out next year, because will the Seahawks give up or give in to their policy to not negotiate contracts that have more than 1 year left, and or will Cam Chancellor demand that they do something about it, whether it's a trade or whatnot? That'll be something that we can think about in 2016. But as of 2017, the Seahawks are 2-2, which I think a lot of us had predicted would happen after 4 games anyway. Everything has gone pretty much as planned, although I think we all expected that win over the Lions to not come with a caveat that they probably could have very well lost that game. At the last minute when everything seemed to be going pretty much. I never really questioned that the Seahawks would lose up until moments before that Calvin Johnson play, I think. So the Seahawks also win the game despite losing the turnover battle 3-1. That one just barely coming in at the last second. That's something that doesn't happen very often. I know I've said that perhaps last year when it happened to them. I know when they beat the Bucs a couple years ago at home, they lost the turnover battle 3-0. So that happens, and the Seahawks outgained them total yards 345 to 256, although, like I said, 90 of those yards came on the final drive where they just could not stop them at all.
The defense tried to give it up again. It's kind of a weird thing.
Yeah, the defense is so good.
But they didn't at the end of the day.
And then at the end, they just not.
At the end of the day, you really do have to give them credit. Like that is a
Yeah.
huge ass play.
Amazing. One of the best defensive plays I've ever seen. You
Yeah,
have to
really.
say that.
I mean, you can't discount just because they gave up the 90 yards before that. Like
Right.
that was a hell of a play, and that's
You,
like that's like what Pete Carroll preaches all the time. Like keep playing till the last till the game is over. Like do it longer than the other guy. So um,
who did Earl Thomas do that to?
it was the Rams last year. I can't remember which. I mean, it was Brent
Uh,
Cunningham or one of the Rams running backs.
yeah.
Knocked it out at the goal line. Essentially, which was awesome. So that's why
Yeah.
that those plays are huge. You can't, there's no caveat on that play. There's a caveat on the referee missed the call at the end there, and the Lions obviously would have had another shot at it. But man,
Yeah, because there's a mental acuity and then there's a physical ability, and for players, these players on this team seem to have both. Where it's like, at that moment, it doesn't matter if you tackle Calvin Johnson. If you're out on the
they hit the
50-yard
shit out
line,
of him.
huh?
They hit the shit out of him. Like that's what you do. Like
Yeah, I mean, if you're at the middle of the field, tackle him. But at this point, there is no point in tackling him. So Earl Thomas takes him out from underneath. Cam Chancellor comes in from behind, and his only goal at that point is to punch the ball as hard as he can. He has that ability. I can't imagine what it would feel like to get punched in the face by Cam Chancellor. But I imagine not good, and that ball felt the full force of that. And so the Seahawks do win 13-10, and the Lions fall to 0-4. They are the only team in the NFL without a win. So sorry, Detroit, and sorry to the Lions fans. I know it sucks. But one of the last things I thought before the game ended, and it looked like the Lions were coming back, and they were like around the 20, is I thought back to yesterday's Browns game, and I just thought, no, you're gonna fuck this up, just like the Browns did, because this is just sort of what happens. You're gonna feel really good, and then fate's gonna take it away, and I'm sorry about that, but it has happened. So that's the end of the Instant Reaction podcast as the Seahawks beat the Lions 13-10 in Week 4. They play Cincinnati in Week 5. Come on, listen to Real on the Field Goals this Thursday, as we'll have radio personality from Cincinnati, Ken Brew, come on the show to talk about the Bengals with us, and we'll talk about all that good stuff this Thursday at Real in the Field Goals. Make sure to subscribe on iTunes to Real in the Field Goals and tell a friend. So thank you very much for listening. Again, this is brought to you by the Ballard Agency, and Tell Them Field Goals sent you.